Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Financial Feminism, Sharing the Wealth. I'm Tara Weber, journalist for BNN Bloomberg and a proud University of Calgary alumni, and I'm pleased to be your host for this virtual event. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge that even though we are all joining remotely, I'm confident that every single one of us is residing on the traditional territories of at least one Indigenous nation. I express sincere gratitude for being able to call these lands our respective homes. I'm located in Calgary, Canada, on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, and that includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and Stoney Nakoda, including the Chickasha, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Today on International Women's Day, I'm honored to be joined by outstanding women for a discussion on the importance of gender equality in entrepreneurship. While we're together in our studio set up at the Hudson venue in downtown Calgary, we're carefully following social distancing measures and all other COVID-19 precautions as well. Canada's 2021 International Women's Day theme is Feminist Recovery. On every front, the COVID-19 pandemic has eroded hard-fought gains to gender equality. Women make up 51% of the population, and yet female-funded businesses receive 4% of venture capital. Organizations like the University of Calgary and the 51 are helping find opportunities to reimagine the role of women and rebuild a brighter, more inclusive future for everyone. The 51 is a financial feminist platform where both established and aspiring investors and entrepreneurs can come together for a democratized access to women-led capital for women-led businesses. Excited by this opportunity, the 51 and the university formed a partnership to create Financial Feminism Investing Lab out of the Haskayne School of Business, and it's supported by multiple groups across the university, including the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurial Thinking and Innovate Calgary. The lab, which just recently launched, is a pilot that will help develop content, teach the foundations of early-stage investing, and provide a background to relevant social and economic factors that influence women's access to capital. By challenging the inequity women face in gaining access to capital investments and uniting Canada's untapped female wealth, they're creating a new critical mass of female investors, making Canada the center for female-powered capital. In short, women's economic empowerment is key to unlocking gender equality. Obviously, with the pandemic, we know that women have been disproportionately affected, and on International Women's Day, this is an amazing event, and the timing is just impressive. Opening today's fireside chats is the Chancellor of the University of Calgary, Deborah Yedlin, and co-founder and co-CEO of the 51, Judy Fairburn. Deborah Yedlin is a community leader and Calgary journalist. She's been observing, commenting, and writing about business and politics for more than 2 decades as a journalist for the Financial Post, the Globe and Mail, the Calgary Herald, the CBC Today, you name it. Judy Fairburn is a change maker with a proven track record of building cutting-edge business ventures. A pioneer in entrepreneurial open innovation, she co-founded an innovative $100 million digital fund. She's the Creative Destruction Lab Fellow, University of Calgary Engineering alumni, as well as a Calgary Economic Development and Corporate Board Director. Welcome to Deborah and Judy.
Thanks, Tara. Nice to see you, Judy. And we're going to talk about something you and I have talked about a lot over the years. So we know it's International Women's Day. Women are underrepresented in a number of sectors, whether it's energy, financial services, on boards. But now we're talking about diversification. And what about the opportunities in terms of the diversification that we're seeing in Alberta, and where are women playing in all these different sectors?
Great question. I think it's interesting to think about economic and diversification, and women offer that right together. I think we've got a number of statistics, that we've dug into from the 51 on women-led companies actually outperforming male-led by 63%. And stat out of the US. And I think we see in Alberta, I think one of the things that energized us in forming the 51 was seeing, even here in Alberta, that we're double the national average of women-led or co-led tech startups at 30%. We dig into something else, though. There's a need for change here, though. A recent study coming out of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor 2019 data showed us that starting companies, women and men in Alberta have been equal as owners, 16, 17%. You get out 3.5, 4 years, women then start to drop way down. only about 7% of the owners then are women, and men are still up a little higher. And there's a gap there. Why is that happening? There's lots of polls, and I think this was done, of course, pre-COVID with respect to personal family priorities, even making sure that we drive hard enough for profitability, but also other opportunities come to women. But what I'm really encouraged by is the young women in this province, 18 to 34, they are double the number. That's just that small age range is double the number of entrepreneurs of women even older than that. So it tells me that positivity is, we have a positive change here that's happening. Younger women in this province are driving the change. And I'm so proud to see, and Kelly, it's great that you're on, Benevity, one of our big success stories and unicorns here, led by a woman. And I would love to talk a little more on ag too, if we could.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're looking at so many opportunities in the ag sector right now, and obviously being pegged as a very important area for diversification in Alberta. And so I'm curious, you're part of the CDL, the Creative Destruction Lab, Rockies, you're tuning into the ags, the ag day, the ag segments. What are you seeing in terms of the ag sector?
So I think if we look at Canada more broadly, there's kind of a unique statistic, and this bodes well for Canada. Nearly 1 in 3 farmers in Canada are women, between the ages of mid-30s to 50s, actually.
I'm thinking that would shock a lot of people.
It would, I think it would shock a lot of people, because I'll use that parallel, they're hidden figures. And I think that's a bit of the challenge, because there's a lot of talent there. Only 3% of venture dollars are going towards women-led ag companies, 7% of the deals, and there's some great opportunities. Right here out of U of C, Synergia. Right. And what she is building, and it's neat because it take carbon dioxide, mix it in with biotech and algae, form a very valuable food product. So I think there's some great opportunities even been seeded here at U of C.
So let's just switch tracks a bit, because we know that the traditional energy sector doesn't have the greatest representation in terms of women, but women are making an impact when it comes to clean tech. Yeah. We've seen a number of companies, again, come through CDL Rockies, Summit Nanotech being one of them. What is it about clean tech and women and why are women leading in that sector?
So I've noticed the same observation, actually.
Interesting.
And I'm an engineer. I pivoted to clean tech about 20 years ago. I remembered doing my MBA, Michael Porter's article, Green and Competitive. And I think the key thing here is, to women in STEM in particular, you want a meaningful purpose. Sustainability drives a purpose. And I think that is very appealing. If I think about Amanda Hall's story, and so pleased to have been involved with her at CDL and seeing amazing things that she's happening. It's great. Shelly was on Ryan Jesperson's show with her this morning. Right. She deliberately chose to pivot. She was looking ahead and said, I want to be part of creating a sustainable lithium mining of that in a very sustainable way, because you could see the trends with electric vehicles.
So are you seeing this sort of as people being in the energy sector traditionally and saying, you know what, I have skills that I know can be applied differently and to have impact, and that's where I'm going to go, and that's why I'm going to have credibility.
Intentionally pivoting. And I think that's really important, that we not lose those clues. And I think those women and others that are out there looking ahead and then acting on it, boy, that's what this province needs more of, and I think we have more and more stories.
So, you're part of the 51, you've been very active in the entrepreneurial world since you left the big corporate structure. What do you see as barriers going forward, writ large, in terms of whether it's women advancing and achieving their goals? We talked about ESG earlier. What do you think needs to happen? What else needs to happen? Is it in the school system? Is it in the corporate world? Is it advocacy? Where do we need to go? Is it quotas?
Probably all of the above.
Okay.
I think one of the interesting things I'll say has been a really wonderful experience from the 51 is, alone we might think, gee, that's a great thing to do. And I'll be frank, teaming up with Shelly and Alice, and then Shelly and I running, operationally the 51 now, we're doing things that maybe on our own we wouldn't have been as brave to do. And yet we have all the skills. And then we extend that further to the community of 10,000 that's in the 51, and our group of investors over 95. You get a room together, we realize we know more than we think. Sometimes I think we get in our own way. And you bring it together, that collective skills and cheering each other on. Wow.
So are you talking a bit about a rainforest equivalent to bringing women together. So let's just switch tracks for a little bit. I mean, let's talk a little bit about your journey as an engineer and what you faced and what you've applied in terms of your new adventures in the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial sphere.
Yep. So I think I'd say I'm almost on my third act now. So first one was an engineer, a lot of time in the field. Second act, pivoting, doing an MBA and as a business executive. And then with always this interest in venture and entrepreneurialism, and now as an entrepreneur with the 51. And I think what's been key to me throughout that is seeking out diverse experiences and networks. One of the, and I really value the meshing up of people in different worlds.
Yeah.
So when I was in the corporate world, loved teaming up with entrepreneurs. Even did a stint down in the federal government 15, 16 years ago, which at the time in Calgary was thought to be pretty crazy.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, and someone said to me, why would you go do that? Because they're not relevant to us. Oh my God, have they ever had an impact?
Yep.
But I think, just being curious, I'd say, and keeping learning, because when you mesh up different worlds, that's where innovation is unlocked.
And you never
and
know
you
where
create opportunities. Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Deborah and Judy. That was really great. All of the above essentially on the table. Continuing the discussion today is energy entrepreneur and director of Interface Fluidics Limited, Heather Christie Burns, and co-founder of the 51, Alice Reimer. Heather is an energy entrepreneur and corporate director with experience founding, scaling, and selling 2 companies. She's an associate at the Creative Destruction Lab, a member of the University of Calgary's Board of Governors, and a mentor for technical and financial professionals, and was recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women in 2018 in the CIBC's Trailblazers and Trendsetters, Calgary by the Women Executive Network. Alice is a successful tech entrepreneur and dedicated community mentor and leader. Currently, she's the CEO of Phillip and the site lead for Creative Destruction Lab. Alice also co-founded Calgary-based Avoco and was the CEO of Chaotix, a pioneering software leader in the crowdsourcing and open innovation space. Welcome to both Heather and Alice.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. And Judy and Deb are a really hard act to follow, but we're definitely going to do our best. So not treading over ground that they already did, but one of the things I wanted to open up with, Alice, is just talking about the percentage of women that you're seeing and the variety of things you're touching right now. So as Tara mentioned, and I'm a new associate actually in the CDL program since late 2020. I haven't had the in-person experience, but I'll tell you, they make it super exciting on Zoom. It's incredible. So, but in terms of the full program, Alice, I was encouraged to hear, what are you seeing right now in numbers and participants on the women's side starting these companies?
Yeah, so we're seeing, one couple things I want to just comment on. Judy and Deb talked about the 30% of Alberta-based startups, so we're leading the national average. And that's coming from 2 parts. One was a 2017 study of Move the Dial. What was interesting is only 5% of Canadian companies, tech companies, are founded by a female founder, solo founder. That number goes to 13% when you add a mixed gendered executive team. So here in Alberta, we're punching way above our weight class. And so from a CDL perspective, and very quickly, CDL, we are a program inside of the University of Calgary, obviously at the Haskayne School of Business, and we're about how do we actually take and accelerate the commercial potential of deep science and technology-based companies. So really and truly things that are coming out of our university labs where there's been hundreds of millions sometimes, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars invested in these ventures. And so, from a CDL perspective, we do a couple things. One is female-led ventures is something we track very closely. And in fact, across our whole network, so across the 9 labs, we're punching about 28%. CDL Rockies, we're working towards trying to get over 30%, but this year we're sitting about 21, and last year we were about 28. So we're sort of, we're managing to meet those same sort of milestones. We still need to do more.
Yeah, I think that going back to what Judy was talking about and just seeing, what's happened out of the traditional industry. So I built my companies in the traditional industry. I have run 2 startups in the last 15 years. I'm an engineer by background. So I was running up a swim lane that, you didn't really see a lot of other women in. But I think encouragingly, as we've gone through all of these economic changes, Calgary is a very educated place in terms of young people coming out with post-secondary degree. So also at the U of C, and I'm just so impressed watching how experiential learning and the entrepreneurial mindset's being knit into everything that's going on. Women are seeing this and they're eating it up. Like, this is just something where it's like a sponge waiting for some water, and I'm so encouraged to watch that happen. So many of them are now in what I'll call the emerging industries. Like, we've got, the brand new, the tech coming up, which has already been here, but it's growing so much, and clean technologies in particular.
Yes.
So that's definitely something that we see because of those skills. I think those STEM backgrounds, the business backgrounds, the melding of those two things has been so encouraging. Yeah. And so just going back to, I think something we talked about earlier on before starting the firesides was about, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And the concept of role models. And Alice, I wanted to throw that to you to hear about some of the feedback you're getting and the things you're touching right now.
Yeah, we've talked about it, right? It's championship, it's sponsorship, it's role models. And one of the, I actually went back to, the Deal Flow study of 2018, Alberta Enterprise put that study out and asked, why do you think we see double the number of female entrepreneurs in tech in Alberta? And the thinking behind that is because of the role models. And the women that we have in our innovation ecosystem here in Alberta, and the female leaders that we have, and the entrepreneurs like yourself, and the work that Judy and Shelly and Deb and Gita, like all of that, those are examples of role models. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they think that we have such a high proportion of female leaders and female entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs. And of course, I think it's in the water. It's a little bit in our DNA here in Alberta. We talk about being quite entrepreneurial, and it's one of our big visions at the university as well, right? Being the most entrepreneurial university and the most enterprising city.
Yeah, I think a good read, if you haven't read this one, but Aretha Van Herk, she's a local author, and I love her book on Mavericks. So I think this applies. Clearly, the gunslingers are not just the men. So, I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the feedback you've had, Alice, I guess on looking at where we come down through the proverbial pipeline, not referring to the physical one, but the one about women coming up, interested in STEM, interested in entrepreneurship, and just some of the feedback on, what we're seeing at maybe the junior high or high school levels, where that gets touched.
Yeah, I mean, again, role models and opportunities. So one of the programs we have at CDL is called the Apprentice Program.
Yeah, I thought this was wonderful when I heard about it.
And, the Apprentice Program originally started out as the high school girls program, and we've just, rebranded it and relaunching the initiative because we believe that there's an opportunity to potentially change a young woman's career path, right? There isn't just, sciences, there just isn't business, there could be a whole host of those things. And so by giving them opportunities to meet with scientists, to hear, we just hosted one the other day with Synergy, or you heard Judy talk about that earlier, and Angela, and her career trajectory, in order for her to become a deep tech scientist, I think she started out in the liberal arts doing a communications degree. And so the opportunity to hear that journey, so 14 to 18-year-old young women having this opportunity to hear that, I mean, it's incredible. So if we can change one or two young women's minds about, it doesn't just have to be one or the other. It can be an and, not an or. Yeah, I think we have an opportunity for sure.
I love that comment on the and. I remember when going through school, I love writing, I love creative writing. And then I became an engineer and I thought, wow, these reports are going to be pretty dry and I can't even put any humor into them. So that was a bit of a challenge. But I love what Judy said, just talking about working at the intersection. So I'm seeing so much more of that. Just going back to what's happening at the University of Calgary, we have a brand new growth through Focus strategy that's rolling out right now, and they're going through Congress where they're talking about this with all the faculties, and it's the idea of and. So it's the idea of, if we're going to solve these big problems, if we're going to solve, what are we going to do on our industry here in Alberta relative to looking after people and also dealing with the impacts of climate change? What do we do? And we have so much talent. So if we're not using all that talent with all the brains at the table, we're not going to get there. And so this idea of intersectionality and knitting it together, I've just been so encouraged watching that happen.
Let me read you a quote from one of our young high school girls in our program, because I think it speaks to this, you don't have to choose, you can have an and. Yeah. So again, young women get to spend an opportunity to spend a couple hours with our fellows and associates, people like yourself, or Judy as an example, or Shelly joining our lab in CDL Atlantic. And this is what she came out with. Before the module, I actually thought that if you study scientist, you'll be a scientist working in a lab, and that's the only path. However, I got to know that passion is what determines the future. A scientist can be an entrepreneur, a CEO of a company, and many more possibilities. And I thought that just spoke so clearly to where we are.
Yep, I love that. You know, I didn't bring out my lab coat today, but man, I am not afraid to rock that. So I thought this was great just to hear it. Last comment, I think we have like a couple seconds left, but an exciting initiative as well, because there isn't just 5, there's 6 or 7, but the UCD Fund. I wanted you to get a little comment in on that, Alice.
Yeah, so we've started the UCD Fund at the University of Calgary, and it's really, it's an amazing opportunity. There's this time in place when, you know, you're coming out of your university lab, you haven't quite got enough capital to commercialize. You know, we've started a UCD Health Fund. There's an announcement coming with a couple of other funds here very quickly, very exciting. So we can help get them out of the lab and get them that first little bit of funding. The other thing that I'm incredibly proud of, alongside one of our fellows, Vincent Shelly, has started something called the UCD Haskane Student Fund.
Yeah.
So we actually now have University of Calgary BComs and MBA students investing capital into CDL companies and learning the process. It was intentionally, we're about 50-50 male-female. So
this is way safer than Robinhood, and this is going to be like super exciting. Okay, I'm going to leave it on that.
Exactly.
Thank you, Heather and Alice. And here's my and. I definitely can see that the gunslingers are not just the men. Now, lastly, I'd like to introduce Gita Sankapanavar, and University of Calgary's board chair, and Shelly Kuipers, co-founder and co-CEO of the 51. On top of serving as the chair of the Board of Governors for the University of Calgary, Gita is the founder and CEO of Akira Impact, an essential assets investment firm that invests to support UN Sustainable Development Goals. Prior to Akira, she was co-founder and president of Grafton Asset Management, a $1 billion energy investment firm based here in Calgary, Alberta. Shelly is hell-bent on taking the status quo, turning it upside down, and then transforming it with more equitable, feminist, and corporately sound and ecologically sustainable options. Previous to co-founding the 51, she co-founded crowdsourcing company Chaotix and software development and marketing firm Stormworks. She's also currently co-founder of consumer participation company Iovia, family office at Venture Capital, and Harris Kuipers. Welcome, Gita and Shelly.
Hey, it's great to be here. I don't know who's going to be interviewing who in this session. And I think maybe we are the activists and the troublemakers of the group. But maybe we'll just dive in. Gita, we were talking about some of these statistics. And we heard some of them from Judy and Alice as well. Entrepreneurship by women has increased 114% over the last 20 years. We know that in Alberta, women are at 30% in leading innovation companies here in Alberta, tech-based companies. Yet, we had a record year of venture capital in Calgary last year. Women's participation in venture capital is going down. So what are the solutions that we have to seek out, both intrinsically and extrinsically? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give you an excerpt as somebody who is an entrepreneur, an investor, and a huge supporter of women just like yourself, Shelly, and the 51. I had the opportunity about a year and a half ago to serve on the Trump-Trudeau Council for the Advancement of Women on their roundtable specifically to support scaling up businesses, women entrepreneurs. And they asked exactly that question. They asked the question, there are so many women entrepreneurs who start businesses and seed companies, yet why are so few of them able to successfully scale businesses? So they brought this group of women together who have successfully scaled businesses, like a lot of the people in these panels, and they asked us this question. We all kind of looked at each other around the table and said, "Are you kidding me?" We all knew the answer. It was very simple. Number one, access to trusted banking relationships, where people will take a risk on them, take a bet on them, support them in their journey. And of course, along with that comes capital, access to capital. Because without that, how do you do and how do you achieve what you need to achieve? And so thank you to the 51 for doing all the great things that you're doing on that space. Number two is access to trusted relationships and networks. entrepreneurship and being a CEO, it can be lonely at times. And so if you can put together great networks and have great mentors and sponsors and champions who can help you think through the problems of starting a business. And at the University of Calgary, we have the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurship, as well as so many amazing professors who are ready to help our students in being entrepreneurs. But that's like the second big issue on why it is harder for women to successfully scale businesses than their male counterparts. That access to that trusted networks. And then number 3 was access to quality childcare and affordable childcare, because throughout the 20s and 30s, which is when women tend or entrepreneurs tend to start businesses, that is also when women start having children. And so thinking about how to ensure that they have the ability to protect what they want to do, and I think we've heard this concept a couple of times, the and, not the or, is one of those things.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Judy and I were just talking with one of our financial feminist allies this morning, and we landed on 3 as well. And we said, number 1, it's access to capital, trusted banking relationships, right? But having access to capital, finance. Number 2 was building these companies. So how are we actually going to change the statistic around, if we go beyond the 30%, it's 6% of these women-led companies actually become growth companies. We have to provide the infrastructure for these women, in particular, to learn how to build high-growth companies. And number 3, they need to be global companies. So how do we think beyond our Alberta border or Canadian border, and we think to export? So it's capital, it's building these companies, and then it's exporting them to make them global.
So Shelly, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, that's right. You're supposed to be interviewing me.
What advice would you give to the female entrepreneurs that we have who are listening today in terms of what are a couple of things that they should be thinking about as they're starting or thinking about building their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I would say dream big. I would say build a network that is so much more talented than yourself. So surround yourself with super talent. So it could be, we talked about mentors and sponsors. I push even further and I say surround yourself with champions, like those that are saying you will be successful and I can be a platform for you to create success. So I would say think big. I would say surround yourself with talent that's more talented than yourself. And then I would say, use your network, like you're saying. So how do I get doors open? How do I access different types of financial capital? I think Canada is really good at providing this infrastructure that allows for entrepreneurs to access ecosystem and grant funding, even before you need the actual, it could be venture capital, it could be banking lines, right?
I want to build on the point that you just made on building networks. This is so important. When I started my career, my first company that I started, I was backed by SoftBank, and I did not know what I was doing at the time. And I was just so lucky to have a phenomenal champion and was able to start building networks. I think I probably should have read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I probably should have read it more than once, but it's I think the world around us right now it's no longer this corporate ladder. It's a jungle gym. It's where you have to be looking all around you to build relationships, and those relationships are opportunities for you to learn something about every single person that you come into contact with. And if you can do that and do that effectively, then it's a great way, as you're starting to be an entrepreneur, think about entrepreneurship, that you can actually ask for advice. And that's probably, to build on that point, one of the biggest piece of advice that I would give people is don't hesitate to go out and ask for help.
Totally. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think, think beyond the idea. I think so many entrepreneurs have a great idea. They're the scientists of their idea or the product owner of their idea. But your idea is only going to be as powerful as the market adoption. So really make sure that you've built in that commercialization DNA inside of your company so that your idea can achieve its true potential. We're here about the Financial Feminism Investing Lab. So what would you say to women around all things finance? So again, if we go back to this concept of, I've got an idea, I'm going to bring it to market, maybe that third pillar is really, developing your financial skills. And what do you think is lacking there, and what's the role for us to play?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this, both at UNICEF as well as in other areas, on how to engage women to think about investing and finance, or to be an investor, not just to accept the capital. And I think that there's two pieces. Number one is something that you touched on earlier, Shelly, which is that women tend to they tend to apply for jobs. They tend to think about entrepreneurship from a perspective of what their track record has been versus what their potential could be. And the second one is that in order to think about investing or having the ability to access capital, not only do you have to have that amazing sense of self and strength and confidence and courage to go out there, but number two is you also have to have the literacy and the engagement and the network to bring that all together to actually power you forward and power your business forward. Because financial knowledge alone does not beget access to capital. You need that plus engagement plus the networks. And I think the work that you guys are doing at the 51 to support women founders and entrepreneurs is just fabulous. And the work that the University of Calgary is doing, again, with the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurship is just wonderful and is building so many female entrepreneurs. So thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Gita and Shelly. I got so much out of that. The think big, the surround yourself with people who have the skills you need, rely on your networks, and just make the big asks. There's so many things there. So we're going to dig into this a little bit more with questions from the audience, and we definitely want to hear from you. So please submit your questions using the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. Let us know if you want the question directed to a specific panel member, please. So first we have a question here I'll throw it to Gita. Research shows that women are more risk adverse or risk aware than men, which often affects their potential as entrepreneurs and investors. Do women need to adapt and accept higher levels of risk in order to succeed?
I actually don't know if I agree with that statement. I think given the fact that women have to manage so many different things, it always is about where are you at your point in life. So as a female investor and as somebody who tracks women in investing tend to have a better track record because what we do is we actually think about the fan of possible outcomes in every decision that we make, and then we probability weight those outcomes based off of team knowledge and support and market data. And then we try and figure out how do we protect our business or our decision by the worst possible piece. I think so I think that in that case, it's more of a mindset shift than it is about being risk averse. I think it's actually smarter to think about what are the risks that you need to mitigate or protect against than just jumping in and taking them without knowing what's going to be on the other side. I think, and then just to finish on that comment, I think that there's also a huge importance to understanding at what point in your life do you make what decision. When you are 20, and then that holds for men and women. When you're 21 years old, you have a lot more opportunities. When you are 28, maybe with a first child, maybe being the sole breadwinner, the ability to take risk is very, very different. And then again, when you have wealth, when you have reputation, when you have family, your ability to take risk again there grows. So I'm not sure I agree 100% with that statement. And so that's just my perspective on it.
It's a good perspective. We also know that there's a bit of imposter syndrome that often plays in. So this one I'm going to throw to Heather. How can women find the confidence they need to become successful entrepreneurs and investors?
Tara, that's one that's definitely had a lot of literature on it. One thing that I think for the audience to understand is the imposter syndrome is actually affecting men and women. It's just that on men it's not talked about so much. So I think going back to it, this has been well documented that women will wait until they match 120% of the job description before putting their hand up. And I think the counsel would be, if this excites you and something matches where you want to go, put your hand up. And thinking through, like Gita's description of the situations when thinking about risk was a really good way to jump off of that, where what is the worst thing that will happen to you? And again, thinking about that based on your family, position in life you're on, that will inform that decision that you can make when thinking about it, going forward. So again, the imposter syndrome, a really, really tough one, but going back to it, I think, women think pretty deeply. A lot of times they internalize what happened and that they had a hand in it, which I actually think is really good, because research also shows that on risk-taking side and many men will blame external forces for why they failed, whereas women will take responsibility for it and say, well, it was all me. And the truth on both sides of that dial is really generally somewhere in the middle. So being self-aware is really good, but being too much in your head is probably not healthy either. So I think, coming out of your own head and that counsel, Shelly spoke about that so eloquently, but about that network and those people that are there with you, who know you, and who can push you and question you, especially when you're in the dark holes, right? I think that matters quite a bit.
Good advice for everyone. This next one I'll throw over to Deborah. I know you wanted to answer the previous question, so take that, as well as what sectors are currently attracting investors in Alberta.
So I just wanted to actually add to what Heather said, and I think one of the things we have to really help women do, and I think actually it applies to everybody, is that this notion of accepting risk means being able to recover from failure. And that's something that is very important to learn through the educational journey that everybody takes, whether that's formal or informal. The ability to recover from failure is absolutely critical to being able to take risks in your life, whatever those risks you choose to, whatever risks you choose to take. So as far as opportunities in Alberta, I think, Judy and I talked about some of the things that we're already seeing. The clean tech space is being, I think, dominated by women who are seeing the opportunities to apply their knowledge and find ways to apply the strengths of the Alberta economy. So, whether it's carbon upcycling, it's Carbonova, it's Synergia in the ag space. I think we're seeing a lot of windows open that don't necessarily have the same pre-existing structure for women. And so they're seeing an opportunity to make an entrance and to make a difference. So I think those are the spaces that we have to keep an eye on.
Okay. Shelly, I have one for you, but first a comment. Shelly is awesome. But your question would be, how can we normal non-venture capitalists support other women?
What was the question again?
How can we normal it's disappeared on me, but how can we support other women essentially who aren't in the space?
Yeah, I would say, if I understand the question correctly, I think what we're saying is that there's people that are in the venture space and then there's people that are not. I think, what the 51 did was we said, there was already a table there, and it was called venture capital, and we bumped up against it for several years and said, change your statistics, change where you get your capital from, change who you're investing in. And so the 51 really embarked on that journey to say, we will build our own table, and it will sit side by side. We will change where the money is coming from. We will change who's managing the money, and therefore we will change who we are investing in.
Now, I know that answer was also wanted by Alice. So Alice, in terms of support from other sectors, how can we best support?
Actually, I just want to add to what Shelly talked about, and we talk about this quite a bit at the 51, which is we have choices as women how we spend and how we invest. And so think wisely about how and where you spend your money. Is there a well-diversified executive leadership team? Are the values there? Is that, do they have women on the board? Once you start to pay attention, it's one of the things you can't unsee when you start looking at companies now. Is there a well-diversified executive leadership team? Are there women on the board? What percentage of women are on the board? What roles are they playing within those organizations? And so one of the things we also talk about a lot is, we have choices as women with income to invest, to purchase. Just make a decision as to how you want to spend that.
That's a really good point. Gita, I understand you want to weigh in on this as well?
Absolutely. I think Alice just made one of the most important points of the evening here. And it is about choice. I think that there is a moment in time that we are living in right now, and every decade or so, there is a significant shift in investment trends, and that shift can be because of technology, because of policy, or because of a human call to action of some sort. And COVID has ripped the blanket off of the deep systemic inequalities that exist in our society. And we have such an opportunity to rebuild a more sustainable and radically inclusive world. And a big part of that is consciously committing capital to build the world that we want to live in. And I think we've lived through this period where people have just raised their voices, their votes, and are now spending with their wallets on things that they care about and brands that align with what they believe in. And they're doing this already with the products that they choose to buy, whether they're buying organic or not inorganic, the food that they're choosing to put into their body. And now it's about where are they putting their capital? What are they supporting? So thank you, Alice, for bringing that up. I think that is a absolutely critical, pivotal moment in our time. And that is why women and access to capital for women and for diverse communities is it's just so critical today.
Wonderful. And Judy, you want to weigh in this as well?
Yeah, excellent points, and I want to build on it. One of the things that was a huge eye-opener to me is in Canada, the forecasts are by 2030, women are going to be responsible for 65% of the wealth. That is a huge shift from a third a decade ago. That's where we were. And so with that, and then women, I think building on the points of Alice and Gita, Shelly and whatever, actually 85% of the purchase decisions are made by women. So this is a dramatic shift. And so when it comes right back to why the 51, why the emphasis on financial acumen, why the emphasis on financial feminism, because actually it's an economic imperative. We have to be prepared to be equal and to be comfortable with the skills to act, put our buying, put our decisions on where we put our capital to work, because we're going to be in the dominant position of influence, period.
Wonderful. And Deb, go ahead.
Just, there was a McKinsey study that was done, and it showed that if we work to close the gender gap in the workplace, we would add $150 billion to Canada's GDP, and $21 billion of that would actually accrue to Alberta. We need to really find a way to close that gap, because it's all about growing our economic future, and women have to be part of it. Otherwise, we as a country, as a globe, we suffer. We don't attain what we can.
Fair enough. Now, Shelly, I am going to come back to you, and we have a question from Tara in the audience, and she says, can you speak to the importance of the formal and informal networks and the roles they play in scaling and building businesses?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of situations that I think play to that. One would be this idea that there are incubators, accelerators that are specifically being designed for women by women, which I think is really important. I think that seems to be kind of like a theme or a trend in all things financial feminism, is that we are designing or we are investing in the world we want to see. So I think that there's like the more formal structures that you can tap into. It could be, working with Carrie Houston and her team at 3-to-1 Growth, for example. That's a very structured program. The informal, I think that's where all of the kind of the hidden value is. And that's where you really have to go on the discovery to go, okay, I'm going to go meet Gita. Who is Gita going to introduce me to? What are the things that I can learn from Gita? And how can she help me open the doors beyond her to accelerate and amplify her business? And so I think those two aspects are really important, and I think it's the latter one that is the more powerful one, because that is where you go on a discovery with you and your team, individually, collectively, with the network, to determine, well, where are you going to get the best human capital or intellectual capital side by side with that financial capital.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Heather, I understand you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, I do. This has been a really big one for me, just post the sale of my last company and just kind of morphing into something new. I'm in my, probably third act Like, I've got Judy to look to, and it's very encouraging on that view. But what I wanted to talk about on informal and formal networks was the idea of the weakly held people in your network, where there's second or third connections. And it's been well proven that a lot of opportunities come from those connections where they're not necessarily your core circle. See, the important thing is when you're building out that core circle is the people that will support you, know you, but then importantly, people that are second order from that, introductions there, and then those opportunities coming from that broader network, you know, from something different. So I think one thing I've purposely worked on is coming out of oil and gas was developing networks in looking at things like the arts or looking at areas of different technologies and that intersection and having people along all those lines and connecting it there. I've also been a participant in formal network and mentoring programs. Those can be really helpful, but the informal side, it's that next conversation that you can't chart that gets you that opportunity. So I think it's important to, every conversation you have, ask someone, who else should I talk to?
And maybe that person would be Alice, who wants to weigh in as well.
Oh my gosh, you're awesome. I think the one thing that I would love to add to just what Heather talked about is you can't be afraid to ask. Lots of women, especially young women, are afraid to ask. And you know, it truly is that sponsorship. And I believe that I have a responsibility as a technology leader, as someone in our community, to sponsor, to champion. And when someone asks, to be generous with that. And so I would just encourage, certainly for young women as they're coming through their careers or coming through university, just don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no, right? And then you just knock on the next door and keep going.
One thing, just wanted to break in there and add one extra thing on what Alice was saying, is be persistent and also be thoughtful. And I don't mean, send the best Vimeo you can make. I don't mean that. I mean, think about it as a two-way discussion. You have something to offer too. So, just because Alice is like this kick-ass woman who's done all these things, doesn't mean you should be afraid to say, I might know something that Alice doesn't. And it's a joint discovery. So thinking about where are those intersections with what you do or what you're curious about, it doesn't mean you need to have a CV that's miles long, but don't be afraid, and it is an exchange. I have learned so much from the people that I've contacted or that are at different stages in their career, and I mean, it's given me value. So this is not one way. So I think about it like that.
I like that you guys were bringing up a lot about young women. We know there's a lot of young women that are watching right now. It is the University of Calgary, and we have a question from one of them. And she says, does anyone have advice to women trying to start their career? I'm going to throw this to Gita. They're trying to break through and be seen in an oversaturated job market during this pandemic. So Gita, if you have any suggestions or advice.
Be bold. Be really bold. I'll give you my personal story. So I moved to Calgary about 10 years ago because I met and I married a Manitoban Icelander who happened to be living here. I left my job, my family, my friends, everybody in New York to come to Calgary. I didn't know anybody in this city 10 years ago. I cold called, cold emailed, reached out, asked for coffees. And I had the most amazing experience. Every single person I met in this city introduced me to 5 more, who introduced me to 5 more, who introduced me to 5 more people. And through it, I figured out that where I wanted to play a role. So what I would say is if you're looking for a job, just be persistent, be determined, be disciplined. Reach out to everybody, reach out to every single person in the group that you're seeing on the screen right now. We're all here to help. I think we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and I think that there's I'll quote the words of Madeleine Albright, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, and so we're all here to help. And so reach out to everybody and start asking for a job, asking to learn about their business, asking to learn about the community that they're in, their industry, their personal journey. And by starting there, you will spark the conversation that may lead to an internship, that may lead to a role. And then if you actually have a job and you have a job offer and you're starting off day one, there is the reality. You must be, as a woman, twice as good. You must work twice as hard. You must be unforgettable. That is the reality. But once you have that and once you've done that, you also can have the opportunity to start reaching out to not just your boss or your team, but reach out to other people in the organization and in industry groups and start asking, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your journey. Tell me about your role. How did you get to where you are? And listen, and truly listen to what they're saying and follow up with them again and again and again over the course of your career. And then finally, what I would just say is, if you're starting a job, think about volunteering. Think about service to your community. The skills that I learned from volunteering, from high school, from college, from my first jobs when I actually had a set of skills to give back, even to this day today in my role, in the roles I serve on boards, has given me such amazing networks and leadership skills that is the advice. Those are the three things I would say. Be disciplined, be bold, and persevere in going after the job you want and leverage every single person you can get your hands on. Number two, once you're in that role, work twice as hard, be twice as good as everybody else around you, and don't forget to reach out again all across the organization to learn. And number three, service. Volunteer in your community. The leadership skills that you'll learn there are just, they will catapult you in your life.
Wonderful advice. I bet you guys are all about to get a lot of LinkedIn requests shortly. Now I know that Deb, you wanted to add a bit to that as well.
I appreciate what Gita's just mentioned, and there's never anything wrong with having a lot of chutzpah when you're going after something that you really want. But to the new graduates, I really want to emphasize that you shouldn't think that you're constrained by the letters of your degree. You've acquired a wide array of skills. You have learned many different subjects. And from there, there's a transfer of knowledge to many different disciplines that you may not have considered when you were in the middle of your studies. And so my advice is really to think beyond the subjects you've studied, see where that transfer of knowledge can be applied, and go for what you really want to do. I graduated with a BA in English and economics. I call it my Be Anything degree. I think we have to think more broadly about what we've learned and how we apply it in many different disciplines. We're not siloed anymore. This world's a very broad one, and all our skills can be applied in many different ways. Judy has something to say too.
Chancellor, really well said, and I'm just going to go really brief. We have a couple of many amazing people in the 51, a couple of recent U of C grads, and they had chutzpah. They came after us and they said, I'm interested, and they were flexible. And that's what my advice would be to any young people. Don't look necessarily for a job. Look for a chance to go in, do a small little project, gig economy, and see where it goes from there, because that's worked out really well for us, and we're reverse mentored. We all learn from each other. So just take that approach.
This is such a great room to be in. And Shelly, I understand you want to weigh in on this as well.
Yes, I do. Alberta has the worst wage gap in Canada. It's going to take 108 years to close that gap at the rate that we're at. So I would say to women, value your worth. Ask for what you are worth. Be paid equitably.
Okay, great. I'm going to bring it back to this group over here, which is Heather and Alice. So Heather, this one's on you. She says, we have talked a lot about technology-based companies and women's leadership in non-traditional sectors. I wonder what opportunities and challenges you're seeing for entrepreneurship and investment in the arts and social sectors as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I was on a call with, this was Intergen recently, which is another great group in the city. And so just the efforts of connecting multiple generations of business leaders through the city to people aspiring in these areas. And the film industry actually came up quite a bit. So this is one in Alberta with, I don't know if everyone remembers, and maybe you're not old enough on this one, but I am, The Princess Bride. So Robin writes, she's just recently produced a really cool film called The Land, I believe, that was shot in Alberta. So things like, how can we get involved involved there. So I think that going back to diversification in Alberta and the fact that we live in an absolutely beautiful place, what does that mean? And then thinking about how do we attract, so we can talk all we want about, you know, bringing up the tech industry, which matters, but no one wants to live in a soulless city, right? So if we think about people coming to live here, a part of that's attracting people with a very vibrant place to be, and that has to include the arts. So a couple proposals that I know are, you know, circulating right now are thinking about uses of the office space downtown. What about artist studios? So some of that's definitely in there, and I think going back to it, but looking at that intersection, and Deb really said that quite well about, you know, where you could be. So having some business sense with a partner maybe working with you if you're in the arts. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is look at the acronym changing. So STEM has been what we've been talking about for a long time, so science, technology, engineering, math. Little subtle change, but I don't know if you've noticed, it's now called STEAM. So science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Because guess what? It matters to communicate, it matters if we can write, and it matters if we can engage people's hearts in what we're doing. So it's so much bigger. So that's something I would say is don't be daunted, get good at the business side, and if it's not you, find a partner that can help you out.
That even goes back to what Gita was talking about with, you know, bring in more people with strengths you may not have. So just on that, I know Alice wanted to add her 2 cents as well.
So I think, firstly, it's now STEAMed: science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and design. Right? So it's not even STEM anymore, STEM to STEAM to STEAMed.
So this is like, it's like dumplings then, hey?
Right?
Nice.
Exactly. But I think the thing that's also really important is we talk a lot about the tech sector because we believe it's a key to sort of diversification, whether that's energy diversification or, you know, economic diversification for our city. But I think there's also a key opportunity in social innovation and social impact, right? And so it isn't just economic impact that you have to have when you create a business. You can create, there's tremendous opportunities in the social innovation and social impact space. And Benevi's a great example, right? So corporate social responsibility. And so I would just say, just don't discount, because we talk a lot about tech, just don't discount, you know, to your point, the arts or the social innovation space where, you know, you can have impact.
Wonderful. Well, we're almost out of time for today. I want to add one more comment that we have. This is Manjeet Minhas, one of our local dragons. She says, to all women, your energy, money, and time is currency. Spend it well, invest it wisely. Thank you to our panel members for this important discussion on International Women's Day, and thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. We had so many thought-provoking questions. I didn't get through them all, and unfortunately, it's just the way that it is. We want to hear more, though, about what barriers you're facing in entrepreneurship, investment, and being an ally to create equitable opportunities. So for the next half hour, leaders of innovation on campus are hosting breakout rooms to collect your feedback and share what they're doing to diversify our economy. Breakout room hosts are Kanwal Bakari, one of my good friends, Alice DeKoning, who have led the programming for Financial Feminism Investment Lab. Then in another room, we have Carrie Damon, who is the Executive Director at the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurship on campus, and Jordana Armstrong, the Associate Director of Clinical and Social Innovation at Innovate Calgary. Links to these breakout rooms are in the chat box and in the reminder email that you all received this morning. If you'd like more information about the Financial Feminism Investing Lab or want to get involved, please visit ucalgary.ca or the51.com. That's the51.com. We'll send those links out along with other resources and a recording of tonight's event so you can keep an eye on your inbox as of tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.